Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. And, sometimes in the news, Dr. Lopkin, there's one thing that kind of sticks out, and this is kind of it, isn't it, my friend?
It really is. Unfortunately, it's the loss of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And I mean, let's face it, no matter what side of the aisle you're on, you have to acknowledge the tremendous achievements that this woman did.
Yes, and she's a throwback, and I'm not referring really to her age, but she got along with Scalia. She got along with Clarence Thomas. I mean, that kind of civility is just every minute is going out the window.
It was more than being friends. The relationship between Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Anthony Scalia was phenomenal. They were very close. If something happened in one of their lives, the other was one of the first people they called. It was that kind of a relationship. They were over at each other's homes constantly.
I heard from things like Thanksgiving and things of that nature.
Yes. They were very good friends despite being on the opposite ends of the political spectrum.
Polar opposites.
Yes, and I really wish that in all of these tributes to her, there was more of a focus on that, because we've lost that.
I would agree. And speaking of that, if you're, I'm not trying to be partisan, but it's like Nancy Pelosi inferring that she could just constantly impeach. I mean, are we going to end up in from this and other situations like almost a unworkable government? I mean, that's what we're looking at right now.
It really is starting to look that way. I mean, we've had a 4-year temper tantrum going on, and it seems that our elected officials have lost the ability to work together, first of all, and they've lost their knowledge of what they're supposed to be doing. You can't impeach someone because you don't like them. There has to be high crimes and misdemeanors. Donald Trump nominating someone to fill a vacancy on the Supreme Court is his job, not a high crime or misdemeanor.
But on that subject, I believe, and I don't think it'll ever happen, if Nancy Pelosi actually tried to or attempted to impeach Donald Trump, it would beyond backfire. It backfired last time. This would be outrageous.
It's already starting to backfire. I mean, if she pushed an impeachment now, it would energize Trump's base like nothing before. But we're already starting to see that with the backlash on the Supreme Court. The Democrats, of course, don't want somebody nominated until after the election. And they, of course, point to 2016 when the Republicans refused to have hearings on Obama's nominee prior to that election. But the big problem is that these two situations are not exactly the same. In 2016, you knew no matter who won the election, it wasn't going to be Obama.
True, yes.
And the other big difference is that essentially the Senate was saying, you don't have the votes for your nominee, so we are not going to waste time with hearings right now. Well, now Trump has the votes, so there is actually a possibility of a nominee being confirmed.
I think it will, but I think there'll be delaying tactics. Politically, who do you think this favors? I have my own opinion, but I'd like yours first.
Politically, actually, I don't think it favors either side, because it's going to energize the base of one candidate or the other, depending on how it goes through. If Trump does get a nominee in, I think it will energize both bases. It'll energize Trump's base because they're going to look at the Supreme Court and say, yes, we have a clear majority. We can, protect our ideals. for the Democratic side, I think it's going to energize them because they're talking about if they can take the Senate and the White House, they want to add seats to the Supreme Court so that they can undo what Trump did. Now,
here's what I feel. I think if things play out in terms of parliamentary debate, I agree with you. It doesn't help either. It energizes both bases. It's a net zero gain. However, if there's riots in the streets and basically unhinged reactions on the left, I think it enhances Trump because I think that's one of the things that have helped him in the polls is the riotings and the lawlessness and the defund the police efforts over the last 3 or 4 months.
oh, you're correct about that. If there's rioting, it helps Trump because generally these are, allegedly protests for Black Lives Matter, or if they're protesting the Supreme Court, because they don't want these protests are liberal protests. And if now I'm not talking about the protesters now, but if these protests are accompanied by riots, it makes the protesters look bad, even if they're not involved in the riots. And that helps Trump.
I would agree. And the final thought, we do have the debates coming up, I think either Monday or Tuesday. Just real quick thought, what is your gut reaction on how it's going to play out?
My gut reaction is that Trump is going to dominate the debates. Joe Biden proved this past week he can't even recite the Pledge of Allegiance. So I don't see how he's going to be able to handle any kind of a hard question or a rebuttal from Trump.
We'll see how it plays out. He might be able to rally just for one performance, but I think that's it. We'll keep posted on how this Supreme Court scenario plays out.
Absolutely, and of course we'll be back. We'll be back on Friday, where you can be part of the conversation. Join us at 4:00 at blogtalkradio.com/Carnivore Radio.
Thanks again. Take care.
You've been listening to Carnivore Bites, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can catch us every week on carnivoreradio.com, exvadio.com/podcasts, the Apple Podcast Store, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and wherever you find podcasts.